Yeah. Okay. So very good afternoon to everyone, and I'm so excited today to have the opportunity to introduce Nabanipa Bhattacharya as a resource person for the first lecture in online lecture series. This is an initiative which the Department of Sociology has just started off so that we can have more of resource person from outside the department to come and interact with the students. So both the faculty and the teacher can benefit from this. So a brief introduction about our resource person. Dr. Bhattacharya has an MPhil and PhD in sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She teaches sociology at Sri Venkateswara College, University of Delhi. Her areas of interest includes historical and political sociology, partition studies, and contemporary Northeast India. She has published widely in English and Bangla in books, journals, and magazines. She has been a U.S. Department of State scholar at the Department of Religious Study, University of California, Santa Barbara. Dr. Bhattacharya has also been an MCHV resident fellow at Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, where she completed research project related to the area of cosmopolitan. So she has a wide experience in terms of teaching, publication, and as a research scholar. On a final note, as a friend and a colleague whom I have known since my JNU days, I can share with all that she is a fascinating individual whose company is always cherished. And I'm grateful for her presence amongst us today. Without further ado, on behalf of the Department of Sociology, Kamal Nehru College, I welcome Dr. Bhattacharya to deliver a lecture on what religion offers to us. And kind of let us all keep this mind, a little bit of protocol in mind, that we kind of keep our audio switched off so that we can hear the person speak better. And then we will have a discussion, interactive session with our resource person, and each one of you will get a chance to ask questions and discuss. So I invite Dr. Nabanipa Bhattacharya to deliver her lecture.
Thank you so much, Archana, Sharmishta, and all others of my friends and colleagues from Kamala Nehru College, and I mean Una and all of them. They're not here today. So thank you so much for thinking about me. That was very kind of you, a very generous introduction. I really don't know if I deserve that, but thank you so much. It feels good to hear good things about, what ourselves, yourself, myself. Sorry. Okay. Now, this year has not been quite what we had expected, and we have an extraordinary situation which has been brought about by a global pandemic of unprecedented proportions. It's actually a pathological situation, to quote Emil Durkheim. However, we have chosen to call it the new normal, perhaps because we don't really want to lose hope, and it has created new demands, on us. And one of them is, of course, virtual learning and virtual discussions and learning. We are new to this. We have spoken in classrooms and seminars and conferences in the past, but not many of them really got recorded or stuff like that. So this is indeed really very new. Now I will begin with there are basically two parts of this lecture. One, I will start with the University of Delhi, because we are members of the teaching and the student staff. So we look at the history and evolution of the paper, that is Sociology of Religion, very briefly, starting from the time that I remember, I can recall, and then of course move on to generally what is sociology of religion and what it can do to us and what it has meant, for me. Now, to begin with, I must say right at the outset that religion was never, I never specialized in religion. I was, in fact, you will be surprised to know, and I will come to that, shortly, that we were never really taught sociology of religion at any stage, neither in my undergraduate days nor in during my MA. And this is significant, the fact that it was not taught. And so my entire interface with religion and sociology of religion per se actually comes through teaching, right? So I'm really very grateful to my students from whom I have learned a lot, and of course the Department of Sociology at the Delhi School of Economics. Now there are a couple of stages through which this religion paper passed, and now the one that we have at the moment, which is the 2019 to 20 revision of the syllabus. This is interesting because this actually gives us a kind of view of what sociology of religion meant, for sociologists, and also for particularly in the context of Delhi University and India. Now, prior to 2005, religion was not offered as a separate paper in the sociology undergraduate program. So it was actually clubbed with kinship. So we had a paper called Religion and Kinship, and of course we had Economic and Political Systems. 2005 onwards, in 2005, sociology, it was decided that sociology of religion would be offered as a separate paper. Now it is important to note here that this separate paper was not really thought of as a kind of standalone paper, right? Not thought of as a standalone paper, because as Andre Bette says in the introductory, reading to the current, syllabus on sociology of religion, that, it is important to also see how religion interacts, or what is the interface of religion with other institutions of society. So it was a separate paper, but not really, we never thought it would be, or we did not want it to be a standalone kind of, paper. So 2005, we have a paper where, it would contain, it was the annual mode, it would contain themes like, thinking through religion, where initially we did have Bette's reading, but we had the usual stuff. We had, rationality, we had sacred and profane, and then subsequently we had representations of world religions, something that is missing in all the syllabi. I say syllabi because 2015 onwards, we see a radical change, in the sociology of religion syllabi. There were two which came after 2001, 2015, the other 2019. So it had the usual ones, and of course it had religious practices, including rites of passage, which is again interesting because we don't see rites of passage really featuring in 2015 and 19 syllabi, and of course practices of inversion. Now there was a FYUP syllabus in between, but nothing really changed. The main change, as I have already mentioned, comes 2015 onwards. We see a major departure. We, for the first time, we introduced this paper as with trying to understand the relationship between social and religious, and which actually takes us directly to sociology of religion, right? So we have social and religious. After that, of course, we have the elements of the religious, right? And then we have techniques of religion. No, it was a very long, vast paper. I enjoyed it personally. We had myth, we had of course asceticism and accumulation, time, space. We had body, we had craft, we had solitude, we had eschatology, and so forth. And of course, religion and politics, something which again, features. Now, if you look at the current, syllabus, which in the previous one, I was not involved personally, but close friends of mine, I think Archana was there. But in the current one, we start with, of course, theorizing religion and society. Now, I have a small issue here with this, theorizing religion and society, because this does not, there is no single theory of religion and society really. So the term theorizing is slightly misleading, but never mind. So we start with religion and society, and then of course religion and sociology. Then we have formulating a theory of religion, rationality, which is we have Tambaya's reading, which is the comes right in the beginning, and then we have elements of ritual, which religion, which will include ritual, myth, body, time, and at the end we have something like religion and state. Couple of things are of course missing in this syllabus. For instance, the relationship between religion and asceticism, or religion and economy. Of course, Weber is there, but Weber features, in some other context, but not really in terms of, religion and economy, or religion in, religion and politics, with other institutions, its interface with other institutions of society. Important to know that why religion was initially, clubbed with kinship, and later, of course, because, if you look at the way sociology has grown in India, it always had a difficult relationship with social anthropology. And that lies at the core of this issue of whether to do religion as part of sociology, right? Because religion was always seen as something that anthropologists should do. That is because religion was, it symbolized something to do with non-modern societies or non-Western societies, right? So if at all religion was there in industrial societies and sociology was to do with industrial societies, then, we would study things like, secularization, for instance, which was, a feature of, modern. So we have sociologists doing, secularization as a, as a chosen kind of, area of research. But not really, religion per se, because religion was generally thought of as the domain of anthropologists. And that is one reason why in JNU, for instance, religion in the early years was never really offered, right? It was never really offered because, and I remember one of the faculty members saying as early, in fact, in fact, in 2011, 12, in the All India Sociological Conference, I will not name because we all know him. And, he said that, we don't do religion because sociologists don't do religion. They can do religion, as I said, in Western societies, in advanced industrial societies, as part of, the secularization process unleashed by Reformation and, the Enlightenment. If at all we did things like folk religion, and that too, not really. Sociologists were not, supposed to do that. Or in case of societies like India, we looked at religion only to the extent that it had a role to play in the construction of communalism, right? Or the vexed question of secularism in India. It is only in that context that somehow religion figured. And I'm, of course, talking about the time that I was a student. I'm not talking about my younger colleagues, who might have done a paper on religion. And I think that actually began after Susan Vishwanathan joined, JNU. Because many of you may know that, her major work was on Christianity and Christians in Kerala. Now, so this is something that we really need to, have in mind, keep in mind, in order to understand, how religion really came to be taught to the students of, the University of Delhi in particular, and of course, India in general. Now, so what is sociology of religion? That is, of course, I have taught this paper for 10 years, more than 10 years now. I started with the first Sociology of Religion paper, which was in 2006-7 batch. That was the first, Sociology of Religion paper. And I have enjoyed it thoroughly. And it is important because, and it's interesting that why would I choose religion? I was not really very, keen on religion. Not because, I was really a member of the Communist Party and I was involved in left politics on the JNU campus, but I really didn't bother, much about it. And as I said, we were never really taught that paper. But when I just, gathered the courage to take it up, one reason was that I found that there were more believers than non-believers in the world, right? And my mother is and there's a personal thing here, is a very, staunch believer in whatever she believes in. And I often wondered that what made her believe, the things that she believed in. So it kind of began at home, and then I started doing this paper. I started reading, and I found it to be a fascinating area of, inquiry, actually. Now, sociology of religion, as Bethe, and you must have read Bethe's, piece, religion has been an area of interest for students of divinity schools. That's how religion was taught. Initially it was part of divinity schools. You have the Chicago Divinity School, you have the Harvard Divinity School. So even in the US there is a very clear distinction. And then of course we have philosophers engaging with religion. In fact, it's the oldest question, right? And it has really, drawn the interest of and attention of philosophers. So we have the divinity studies, in which we can include what is called theology. And if you remember, the students will recall that Bethe's entire essay, the introductory essay, is actually about theology. And about the difference between theology and sociology, and how sociology approaches religion, and how theology approaches religion. So in philosophy of religion, we have, as Bethe tells us, for instance, theology and psychology of religion. That is interesting, psychology of religion, because there's so much to do with psychology when it comes to religious beliefs. And then, of course, we have history of religions and so on. Mircea Eliade, the very well-known historian, folklorist, you can call him everything, philosopher, the very famous Romanian philosopher. Right. Now, and then, of course, we have the, social anthropological study of religion. Now, these are, of course, independent branches. Religion, as you know, comprises of beliefs and practices. I really don't need to tell you that, you already know. There are, of course, independent branches, of doing religion, but obviously they are not fixed in time or space. And obviously, these, have much to borrow from each other. However, despite the occasional, collaborations between, sociologists of religion and, other, say, philosophers of religion and so on, we see that we have to note that there is a critical distinction, and critical distinction, I insist on this, between the way sociologists, social anthropologists, and you will see that, Bethe uses the two interchangeably, the two terms interchangeably, between critical distinction between what is called the theological approach and the non-theological approach. Let's say non-theological approach, which would, of course, include the sociological, approach. The theological approach is actually a fascinating, because theology also, draws me personally. Religious texts, for instance, and there are a number of ways in which you can actually study, religious texts. Literature, for instance, has done a great work so far as religious texts are concerned. But the critical distinction is between normative and, as Bethe says, the empirical, right? So theology is basically a normative, mode of inquiry, or, its subject matter, its entire mode is normative. That is, it's already set down, right? It's already, we think that the moment you work within a theological framework, you begin by believing that this religion is true. This religion is true. And the difference between theology and sociology is that, or social anthropology, is that it has an empirical approach to religion, right? It has, in other words, a more kind of, I will not say real, but this is, something like religion at work or religion in action, right? So you don't see religion, you see how religion is practiced, right? And therefore the focus is on practice rather than what is, laid down in texts. Of course, that is also important, as we shall see later, that they actually reinforce each other, reaffirm each other. But of course, the core of sociology, at the heart of sociology of religion, lies this focus on practice, right? On practice. And that's why rituals are so important. In this context, you may kindly note that, the importance of the elementary forms of religious life, the path-breaking work by Emil Durkheim, is, of course, important because of sacred, profane, and so on. But it is more important because it talks in detail about rituals. Though scholars, who work with Durkheim, say that, even that is not enough, right? Even Durkheim himself actually could not somehow pay more attention to rituals. But yes, but the very fact that he could include rituals, right, or practices, that is considered to be something which is absolutely, it was path-breaking when Durkheim did that. Right, so theology, therefore, this is the sharpest distinction. Theology, therefore, deals with the inner workings of religion, right? Inner workings of religion, or as Bethe tells us, about questions of truth and rectitude. I keep on quoting so that students are able to relate, right, to the text that, you're supposed to read, right, in beliefs and practices, right? So theology is based on religious faith. As I said, it believes that it starts on its premise is that religion is true, right? Religious faith. Also, it does not really talk about plurality of religious experience or religious occurrence. In other words, not really a plural kind of approach. It is generally a monolithic kind of understanding of religion. It generally deals with one religion, unless it's in a the theologians are interested, a particular theologian is interested in comparison or so on, but otherwise. So in short, it looks at religion from within, right? Without questioning, without challenging the boundaries or anything, or trying, or without, there's no tweaking of anything, right? It's just whatever is given and you work. Now, please understand that at no point, neither does Bethe nor whatever has been my experience, little experience, short experience of doing religion, theology is extremely important. And we have, because, otherwise really, if there were no theologians, we would really not know so much about, say, individual religions. We wouldn't really know. So thanks to them that we do. But as I said, that this is so very different from the way sociology deals with religion. Now, sociology obviously looks, relies on observation and observation. Sometimes it can also happen, in the field, as in, as Srinivas does, and your students will have to read Religion and Society Amongst the Kurds of South India. That is a very, very important text, because really, Srinivas, and it's very interesting that he calls his book Religion and Society Amongst the Kurds of South India. So he brings in both sociology and religion. And this is something that the introduction to the foreword to the volume written by Radcliffe Brown, Brown mentions it, and he places the study of Srinivas within that framework. Now, yeah, so it deals with observation, of course, description, interpretation, and explanation, right? And therefore, it is about how religion operates. It's about how religion operates, how religion is actually acted out. In other words, how religion is lived in life. How do you lead a religious life, right? And that's why elementary forms of religious life, right? So life is important here. Living is important here. Quite predictably, it has its sociologists rely a lot on the the skeptical element that we have in ourselves, right? And of course plurality, and therefore it is also a study from religion from without, right? So so sociologists therefore look at religion, its beliefs and practices, and obviously its institutional manifestations, right? So for instance, the institution of prayer, it's one of the religious institutions. It is unfortunate that it does not figure in this year's syllabus, but it's a very, very important thing about religion, that is to study prayer. And Marcel Mauss's work on prayer is a work that everybody must read, even regardless of whether it figures in the syllabus or not. So yeah, so therefore we now know that so these two approaches, obviously, as I said, and I reiterate, that they benefited from each other. There was a time when communication between the two, that is theology and sociology, was in the decline. But we see some fresh conversations, in the 19th, 20th century. But again, we know that there has been a decline, a general decline again in theological, studies. Now, one reason for that, of course, is, and the most important reason, of course, is can be actually, again, as I said, traced back to the Enlightenment, right, and the onset of modernity. So obviously, modernity, by unleashing, the process of, secularization in society, obviously diminished to a large extent the value of studying religion, from within. Right now, moving on, the sociological approach, generally is, relies on, or ought to rely on, in general, on the comparative method. Now, I will not really go into the comparative method because anyway, you know about it, and we all kind of must have been taught that right from first semester onwards. So, but comparative method is important, and Bethe goes at length to talk about comparative method, and that's his pet subject. That is, of course, there. But what is more important is investigation of religious beliefs, and, as I said, the way religion, interacts, or what would happen if religion and economy encountered each other, or if we could actually, discover a link between religion and economy, or religion and politics for that matter. Right. Now, in the comparative method, we really don't see much of comparative method in the early years, in works of Durkheim. We do see that in suicide, but not in the context of religion. We really don't see much. Radcliffe Brown and others did independent studies, but at the same time, they kept on talking about the value of comparative, method, value of comparative method. Now, it was Max Weber who also deployed the comparative method, but not in the same study really, that is Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, but he did look at the societies of China and India, as those of you, yeah, I'm sure you are aware of that. Now, comparative method was obviously supposed to be this foolproof, almost foolproof method for sociology, because of course the lifelong angst of the discipline of trying to be a science, trying to be scientific. So obviously some method had to be there, which could actually come very, very close to the method of the physical sciences. So, but there was a problem also with the comparative method. While, Durkheim hailed it and thought that, this was the best method, at the same time, the problem with comparative method was that the practitioners of comparative method were also, positivists. The way they worked, obviously, positivism was a major theoretical framework. It was current then, believed in evolution. So therefore, even if they consciously did not want, a large number of scholars, anthropologists and sociologists actually ended up passing kind of, not really judgment, but there was a kind of preference. And that's how, we would see Durkheim talking about social types, right? In division of labor or in all. So it also would figure in the studies of religion. So there were some religions which were suitable for Western societies. There were some which were suitable for non-Western societies. So more often than not, these studies also ended up being ethnocentric in general and Eurocentric in particular, right? Because, there was this, hierarchy of, religions, where some religions were advanced forms and some were, of course, the primitive forms or pre-modern forms. And you see that in entire elementary forms of religious life. This is precisely what Durkheim does, right? Because it starts with the elementary form, and therefore you go back to the Australian Aborigines and you look at totemism and the evolution of totemism to the advanced, religions. So there are problems with the comparative method, just as there are problems with the value neutral, approach. The sociological studies, which look at religion and, interface of other institutions, the most important and the finest one perhaps is, of course, Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. It's a great, great text, and I think Weber, nothing like it has been attempted really since. I would tell my students, I taught until 2018, that in the context of India, for instance, we could look at, communities like the Marwaris, for instance, or the Jains, for instance, right? Or the Bohras, the Gujarati Bohras, for instance, or, communities which have been associated with trade or trading communities, right? And see, the relationship between religion in that context, in the context of that particular community, we could actually, so when Weber tells us that, religion did not, capitalism could not grow in India precisely because of the Hindu, system of, Maya, the Hindu beliefs in, Maya and so on. that I think is not quite true, because because Weber only saw one version of Hinduism, right? Because Hinduism has so many faces, and the caste system itself actually creates a group, the Vaishyas, which are that community, that group is supposed to deal with trade and commerce, right? So and they do their trade all right, the Vaishyas, and this is something I think Weber missed. Yeah, and so Protestant ethic, nevertheless, throws up so many questions, and actually illuminates us by showing that there can be a very, very close, albeit indirect connection between this worldly asceticism and the growth of capitalist activity in Europe. Right now, or when we come to religion, or or we come to religion and caste, for instance, again a very interesting area of work so far as India is concerned. Religion and politics, obviously, that is religion and secularism. Role of religion in construction of secularism, so on. This is again how religion would. And I think unless we really understand, if we have to understand religion and how it operates, we actually need to see it in the light of other social actions and processes. Right now, finally, I think. There's this whole question that Bethe again addresses, and that is to do with value neutrality. And the question is that whether value neutrality is possible, right? Value neutrality is possible in sociology. And particularly when it comes to studying religion. Now, he of course says that it's hard, if not impossible, to really, in reality, to go by this value neutral, approach. Nevertheless, that does not mean that this approach has no value. The very fact that we really cannot, discard it, right? But it is important that to remember that in sociology of religion, unlike theology, it is actually it is important to at least begin with that. The fact that we ought to be value neutral while studying something like religion, because religion is also it is not just social. Of course, it has social manifestations, and it is social, but it is also personal, right? So therefore religion becomes an emotional issue. It becomes something so it's like studying something that you are very close to. So that does not again mean that people who are atheists will have a better go at doing sociology of religion. No, not necessarily true, because atheism has its own problems, right? Because atheism is also a belief in something, right? And the belief is in no God, right? That itself is a belief. So that can make things problematic. So, so that is, I think, about all, this relationship between religion and society. It is, as Durkheim would tell us, that society divinized, and of course you will read more about it in your classroom. I don't want this to become another it's already become a classroom lecture. I will just end finally, as I said, that yeah, it meant at a personal level, as I said, a lot. And to that effect, and I cannot actually I'm so, yeah, I want to do this. I and my students, along with my colleague Urmi Bhattacharya, we decided to have a special issue kind of our department magazine devoted to religion. And this was to commemorate 10 years of the paper being introduced as a separate paper at the University of Delhi. And this is what we came up with. And so I wanted to show this not because it's a personal achievement, but because it's possible that students can make things possible, and it's completely done by students. And there are about 17, 18, essays, and they're all by students. So, and they're all to do with religion, and religion basically in India and Sri Lanka. And we did this. So this was a small way of, expressing my love for religion. It's a fascinating area of inquiry, and that's about all.
Can we also get a hard copy or a paper?
I have soft copy, so I can send that.
Please. Then our students.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope so we can have questions if.
So thank you, Dr. Napanipa. I can't say how awesome it was. And I'm sitting on the other side listening to it, and I can go back to my JNU days listening to this lecture. Thank you so much. And I can't say, in such a small span of time, in such a comprehensive articulation of religion, starting from the way in which the discipline of religion kind of not accepted into sociology, from Bethe's theorization to Weber, Durkheim. It's kind of everything in one kind of excellent.
Too much, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, but excellent way in which you have articulated, and I'm sure all our students the mind is full of anxiety and queries and questions. So I can now ask students to unmute your mic and ask questions if you have. Yeah. Anyone who has a question, unmute your mic and you can ask.
Ma'am.
Yeah. Yes.
Ma'am, Arundhati this side. I'm so sorry. I can't switch on my camera. It's a huge internet issue. I didn't really need to do that. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you talked about how comparative method is so important to Andre Bette. Ma'am, and we also talked about how how there needs to be some amount, the huge amount of non-biasness when we study religion. Ma'am, but isn't comparative method biased in itself? Because for me, when I compare two things, it is usually to prove that one is better than another, or one is at a higher ground than another. And in something as sensitive as religion, and as broad as religion, doesn't that play a huge role?
Right. Shall I answer this, or we?
Yes, Nipa, go ahead.
Okay.
Do you want to take all questions, or you want to?
No, I think I can. Yeah, this is
better.
So thank you, Arundhati. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, of course. When we compare, that's I mean, technically, ideally, not technically, ideally, you are not supposed to, be biased, right? But that's what Bette tells us, that that's precisely the point he makes, that you end up being so, because you are not just an anthropologist, a sociologist, doing comparative method, but you are also someone who believes in evolution, for instance. And he uses the term evolution. He really does not use positivism. That's what I used, right? But there are, I'm sure you know about evolutionism and also positivism. So, which obviously believes in a linear understanding of history, That is, societies move from simple to complex. Pick up anyone, right? And obviously, at the advanced, the very word advanced means it's better. Right? Of course, it will have what Durkheim would say, a differentiated heterogeneity, and which is what is organic solidarity and advanced division of labor. But everybody does this. Marx does this. Durkheim does. Even Weber does. Right? But Weber is complicated also, because Weber kind of laments. He says, the iron cage of modernity and disenchantment, and the triumph of irrational legal, authority and way of life, and so on and so forth. So, ideally speaking, hona nahi chahiye. Bilkul. Nahi, no, you should be. But it becomes difficult. So, we do see that in Durkheim, and Bethe mentions it. I'm sure you have. I have not really done the entire, I just picked up bits and pieces here. So, for this lecture, but there is much more. It is there. And so, therefore, value neutrality becomes a very difficult business, not just in religion, in sociology, right? In the very concept of ideal type, for instance, as Weber does it. So while ideal type is supposed to be value free, but the very fact that when you construct an ideal type, are you sure that no values go in? Therefore, there are critical differences between terms like value freeness, value neutrality, and so on, right? Being value neutral and being value free may not be the same thing. They're not. So, and we can go on and on. So the point is, as I told you, and I agree with you, that it's extremely difficult, as I said, not just in case of sociology, but also other institutions. Whatever you study, which deals with human life, with social relationships, becomes complicated, right? Yeah, Arundhati, is this okay? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Make some sense. Yeah, I hope.
Yeah,
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, we have the second question.
You have a question, Saranya?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, the questions are coming.
Chirag has a question. Yes, Chirag.
Yeah, Chirag.
First of all, good afternoon, everybody. And good afternoon, ma'am. I am a student from your college only. So I wanted to ask a question that in sociology we studied that how religion binds people together and creating a collective effervescence. But given the fact that if we see the present scenario, how people are fighting on religious lines, so do you think that the collective effervescence which Durkheim even talked about in religion has like faded out in present times, or has it manifested into something else?
Yeah, thanks, Chirag, for joining in. This collective is a very tricky business, Let me start. It's not just, again, in the context of, this is becoming like a classroom lecture. The central issue of sociology, as I often tell my students, is this strange, curious relationship between the individual and society, or agency and structure. We can even put it that way, right? यही सबसे critical issue है. How do we understand this relationship? Society precedes individual, individual precedes society. If you say society precedes individual, then you are actually challenging, this very idea, something which the utilitarians, believed in. Your man is guided by self-interest. So you are challenging the very ability of man to be self-determinate, right? Because you precede. So this collective is a very difficult business, because individuals make up this collective, right? So when Durkheim uses terms like collective conscience and collective, effervescence in case of, religion, technically it reflects the voice. It's a symbol. It's a feeling of the clan in the context of totemism, right? So, but individuals are there, and these aberrations can happen. And as you said, that that if there is a collective, if religion is a collective business, then why does violence happen? Right? That is because violence is unleashed by human beings, individual human beings, A, and B, what is collective is not really collective. Right? So there are problems with that collective. So collective needs to be understood. I don't know even it's possible to understand collective in that sense, but sometimes collective becomes a very problematic thing. And I'll just give one example, and then maybe we're running out of time. For instance, the concept of collective conscience has been time and again used by the Supreme Court of India, famously in the Afzal Guru, judgment, the parliament attack case, and which led to the hanging. And the fact is that you have heard the collective conscience of society, right? Collective conscience of society. Now, this collective conscience actually leads or pushes a man to the gallows. Right? Now, whether he's committed the crime or not, but the fact is that it does. And you assume that the entire society is part of that collective conscience, which may not be true. So which collective conscience are we talking about? Right? So as a student of sociology, it's not about whether I support Afzal Guru, I support capital punishment, but the point is that we need to examine this whole collective conscience business. Can there be a collective conscience, right? This needs to be actually, first of all, examined, interrogated, right? And the way Durkheim uses it, and he uses it in the context of mechanical solidarity, where there is so much of, there's no division of labor, it's homogeneous. So homogeneous hone se, so clearly we don't have that kind of collective conscience in modern society. We don't, right? Because agar mechanical solidarity ka collective conscience organic mein hai, then it becomes pathological. As Durkheim says, that any institution which exists out of place is considered a pathological fact, social fact, right? So we don't have that kind of collective conscience. I don't know if it answers your question, but yeah, I won't take much time. Archana, bahut lamba ho gaya.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, a question hai. There's a girl, Shikwa Jha. She's typing the question in the chat box. She's not well.
I will not take much.
Yeah, so maybe we can just take on this question. Do you think linking religion to present day, the politicization of religion in our society, is something that is really hard to put into theory? It is not so ingrained in our belief. It's hard to separate our analysis from our biases. This also seems to make it a very risky analysis of any sociological attempt to, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever I got means basically she is trying to say that that bias will come in. Is that what she's trying to say?
Yeah, basically, you can read it in the chat box if you can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's there in the chat box.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Really, and do you think that linking the political is something that is really hard to put into theory? Okay, it is so ingrained in our really hard to separate her. Okay, so the question is, can we do sociology?
Yes.
Can we do religion if we are members of society? And the current scenario, if we live in the current scenario, can we? I have a rather, I don't know if this Shikha, Shikha is my student, I think. Yeah. Yes, we can. That is, if we stop looking at social media and using social media, I think then we can do sociology of religion. It is possible. But if we are into social media, then it is indeed hard. And yeah, hard. For one, this is one. This is Yes, certainly it is difficult because uh, because uh, because of the situation, not just in our country, but whichever place it is. And I have nothing, because, if you ask me, I think even the rise of right wing needs to be understood. Because because this is not a propaganda, platform. So as students of sociology, it is important to understand why this happened in the first place. And I think this is what all of us are trying to understand, right? That why this happened. So even if things are difficult, I think we must attempt it. We must attempt it to the extent possible and avoid social media so that we don't get influenced uh, where it's not required. I don't know. Yeah, probably.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
There's another question.
ma'am,
Maybe
I,
this is the last question.
I don't have time, but Archana is the boss. So
Yeah. Yes,
ma'am, I
can
have
you, yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, so my question is actually, as a sociology student, like, if we were to explain to a child what religion is, so how would one do it? Like, if we were to explain a child what religion was.
a child.
Yes, ma'am.
Religion is what you do as when you say you're doing religion. That's it. It's the doing part. It's the doing part. This is what when you do something that you call religious, right? That's it. It has a set of, I mean, of course, with a set of beliefs, right? And beliefs in case of, in Abrahamic faiths, you have prophets. In case of a large number of Hindus, you have many things. You have trees, you have stones, right? That is also, but there is a belief, and that practice is backed by that particular belief. So you need to see religion at work, and that's how that's what the child sees and the child learns, right? Okay, there are more questions.
So I think there'll be more. So do we are already running short of time. So now it's
I don't.
I think it's a never ending. Students have really.
Yeah, why has our religion, has it changed over the pandemic? What do you think, Archana? Has it changed over the pandemic? No.
No.
It's only that you cannot physically visit temples.
Yeah, but then many of us are kind of practicing even without going to.
Exactly.
That's what sociologists
Well,
do.
one lecture is not enough. It's a very vast.
Yeah.
You can go on and on. And
the way in which we have made it in semester mode, and we just picked up pages from, say, Weber, without even understanding the context in which Weber is writing and that's the reason why the students are having this question. So I know from your questions, the students are really very kind of having more of, and there's one more which has come in. Now I leave it to.
This is Masha. Yeah, this is thanks. Yeah.
Okay,
so,
this is the time.
Yeah. That's it. So Medha, just one point. You can so you can just tell this young person, that sociologists, we generally see religion as as constructed, so it's not, we don't begin with the given, right? We see it as a process, how it works on the ground, right? Unlike theologians. I hope that's thank you, Archana.
Okay, great. I just kind of hope this can continue and continue, but I'm sure we can't. We all have our engagements.
I understand.
I request Saranya Saha, who's the president of our Sociological Association, to give a vote of thanks. Yes, over to you, Saranya.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ma'am. As we come to the end of our very interesting online lecture on what sociology offers us, I, Saranya Shah, the president of the Department of Sociology, Kamla Naidu College, would firstly like to extend my heartiest thank you on behalf of the department to our principal, ma'am, for supporting us throughout and helping us to make this event a successful one. Following this, I would like to take a moment's time to extend my hearty vote of thanks to our teacher in charge, Archana ma'am, and to our association teacher in charge, Sharmishta ma'am, along with all our department teachers for always being available for us and helping us whenever we faced a glitch. On the behalf of the entire department, I would really like to thank our speaker, Dr. Nambanipa Bhattacharjee ma'am, for gracing today's event with many and enlightening us with such an enriching lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the informative session. I'm sure it has been beneficial for all of us, and we are really looking forward to have more of these lectures. No event is complete without its audience, so thank you so much to all the students who have present here for making this event a bigger one. May I please request everyone to switch on their camera so that we can take a picture before we leave.
This is mandatory.
Yeah, Jigmet, sorry I couldn't answer your question.
There is a question.
You can send me an email. I'll just give you my email.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll share. We have your email. I'll share your email with all students.
Yeah, there are many questions. We can have another session generally. Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, so the most mandatory thing is the documentary. So I request all participants to switch on your video so that we quickly take a screenshot. Yes, Saranya.
Hello, Una.
Purna?
Nothing, her mic is.
Yeah, lovely lecture, Navanipa.
It's become like a class
I
lecture.
just missed a little bit of it because I thought it was from 1:30. Was worked up with some other things.
I went on and on.
It was good, very good,
Yeah.
very good.
Wanted to make it generally simple. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so have you taken Saranya? Ho gaya?
Yes, ma'am, it's done. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone. Take care
Thank
and
you
stay
all.
safe.
Thank you.
Thank
And yeah, thank you, Pranveer, Archana, and
I think
Sharmishta.
Bharti